In this video, we're gonna make some small tweaks to our UI. I'm gonna show you how to hide the separator lines in a list, as well as change the color. We're gonna add a badge to our tab bar for when we add items to our order. You can see that badge show how many items in our order we have. That's a nice little addition. And then I'm gonna implement the new button system that we covered in the Frameworks app, except we're gonna write a custom modifier to reuse that on various buttons. Okay, so first things first, the appetizer list view. Right, so here it is. It's the list of our appetizers on the initial screen. So on each cell, we want to change the separator. So we'll do it above the tap gesture modifier. So it's relatively simple, right? You can do .list row separator, and you see it's a visibility modifier or parameter. So you can do .hidden, automatic, visible. So you can do .hidden, and we'll run the app, and you'll see our separator lines will be hidden on the cell. I'll do Command-Shift-A to go back to light mode, right? See, there's no separator lines. Purely a stylistic choice. If you want that clean look, there you go. If you want the separator lines, leave it in. Okay, so we'll stop that. So I'm just gonna comment that out so you can still see the code, but we can also do .list row separator tint, right, where you pass in a color. So do that, and we'll say brand primary, right? We'll keep the look going. So brand primary. Now when I run it, you can see now our lines are green. I don't think that looks great, but I'm sure there's a situation where you'd want to color these lines or style them however you like. You can actually make the lines different colors per item, right? Like say our appetizer here had like a color, like a background color. Well, the color you would pass into this list row separator tint is whatever background color that appetizer had. So it can be dynamic, right? Some can have red, some can have green. Again, I think that would look pretty ugly, but I'm sure there's a situation where that would come in handy. So I'm going to leave that commented out because I don't like the way that looks, but I'll leave it commented so you can see the code in the source code. So that is how you can adjust the separators. Let's make that smaller. Now let's talk about the badges because I love how simple this is. So back to our appetizer tab view. I'm gonna not show the preview because I kept getting the crashes as you saw. But before we get to the badges, I'm gonna show you I can clean this up a little bit just because, I don't know, I like the way this code looks better. So you can make these a label. So instead of having an image and a text, that's pretty much what a label is, right? So you could do label, again, make sure you do system image name. So same thing, home, and you'll see how the code looks better. So all I did was passed in the text here and then the system image name here, same thing. So we'll delete that. And then when I see something like this, again, this is pure style preference. If you don't like it, that's fine. But I like to make that one line just to condense the code and make it pretty easier to read here. So again, same thing. Label, system image name, account, and then person. And you'll see why I'm doing this in a second. Well, at least why I like this. Because we're going to add a badge modifier to our order view. And then I like the way the modifiers look when they're all like on one line like this. Again, purely code style preference. As you go through your developer career, you're gonna have many debates about like code style, highly subjective. So anyway, if you don't like this, cool, do you. All right, so label, tab item, there you go. But now when I add another modifier, this is the badge, right? Super simple, .badge, and you can see we need to pass in an integer, right? Because we want a number on our little badge. Now, what integer do we pass in? Well, I want however many items are in our order. If we go to our model, right, in our order object that we have here, right, we have an array of items. So I want to get the count of this items array, and that's what I want to show in the badge. Now, how do I get access to this order? If this is still fresh in your mind, you just did the appetizers app, maybe you know we used an environment object. So if I go to my order view, right, you see we have environment object order. In fact, I'm going to copy this because we're going to need that exact same code. And real quick refresher on environment object in case you're coming back for the updates or, hey, just repetition, right? Remember we injected this order, if we go back to our app here, like the main root, right, at main, the main root of our app, we created an order and we injected it into the environment right here. So all of our views will have access to this order, but to get access to it, like we do in our order view, we have to create an environment object variable called order, right? And that's how we get all this information. Well, because it's up in the environment, like I said, all views have access to this. So if we go to our appetizer tab view, now we can get access to it in our tab view, right? Just environment object, like we just did, I pasted it in there. Cool, now we have access to this order. So when I want an integer to pass in, I can just do order.items. Remember, items is the array of appetizers, .count. And if the badge is 0, like if nothing's in there, it just won't display. Like it's not going to display as 0. So relatively simple. Now let's run it and we'll start adding some stuff to the order and you'll see the badge work magically. Like I love this addition. So we're going to add Asian flank steak, add to order. Bam, look at the badge on our order. Let's add chicken dumplings, add to order. I'm going to add a bunch of stuff real quick. So you can see, cool, 4 items in our order. And then another cool thing, if we go to order, I don't want the chicken dumplings anymore. Let's delete that. Look at our badge, went down to 3. Look at our badge, went down to 2. Look at our badge, went down to 1. And then our badge disappears because we have nothing in our order. That is awesome with relatively simple code. So that's our badge working. Now let's go to our button here, right? So if I go to views, buttons, right? We did AP button. Very similar to what we did in the frameworks app. Remember how we, passed in a title and had our styling like on the text, right? Well, what we're going to do is implement pretty much the same thing we did in the frameworks app for our button, except we're going to refactor that out into a custom modifier so we can reuse that on multiple buttons. I don't think we've covered custom modifiers in this course yet, so another nice learning opportunity. So appetizer detail view, let's get the preview out here so we can see what we're doing. Hit resume. Cool, you see our button $9.99 add to order. Now, if I go to the button down here, you see we have the AP button where we pass in the title. Just like we did in the frameworks app. Well, no, not just like it, because remember, we passed in a label so we could have the little book image. So we could have the book and then learn more. I don't necessarily want to add an image because we have the price here and then add to order. I think it would look too cluttered, too cramped if we tried to squeeze in an image there. So instead of a label, because we don't want an image, I'm just going to do text. And then the string I'm going to pass in is the string I have right here. So copy, paste that. I'm going to comment out this AP button here. So now we should just see some very generic text down there. So now let's start adding modifiers to our button. So .button style, remember this is the first one. This is the style that you're gonna go with. Remember border prominent was kind of the style we want. I'm gonna mix up the style a little bit. Remember I wanna go bordered because I like that new tint look, right? Where it's the same color button with just the tinted background. So that's what we're going for again. And if you skipped the frameworks app and just went right to this appetizers app, if you're coming back to the course, go back. I cover all this in depth. Here, I'm just going to do it pretty quickly to get the style we want. So I want to do .tint, and then the tint is .brand primary. And you can see what we got working over here in the preview as soon as I resume it. There you go. I'm going to click off the button so we get rid of that red square for the padding. Cool. If you like that skinny button, you're done. Again, I like my buttons fat. I like them nice and easy to touch. So you can do control size, and then we'll do .large. Now let's run this app to see this in action because you're going to see how this changes with dark mode too. And I think it looks really cool in dark mode. So let's see our button here. Cool, that's our button. Command-Shift-A to go to dark mode. And you can see we still got that change in color. And now those buttons look really cool, in my opinion, in dark mode. So that's the style I'm going for with my buttons. But you'll notice we use this button again in, well, let me add to order here. In order for place order, we're using this button again. Well, now we're like not consistent. I want that same look and feel of the button. So what I could do, stop running, I could just, copy and paste this and then paste it to my button in the order view. But the reason you don't want to do that is because let's say we do want to change our button style. Well, now I got to go to like every single button and make the change because I just copied and pasted. And that can lead to errors because maybe you'll miss a button or maybe you'll have a typo on one of the buttons and all your buttons won't be consistent. So what we want to do is we want to refactor these modifiers away into a custom modifier. That way on the button, I can just put one modifier and say standard button style, and I know it's always going to be the same. And if that standard button style changes, I can just go into my custom modifier, make the change there, and all my buttons will update. So that's the benefit of doing this. So here in views, right click, new file, and I'm going to create a Swift file here next. And again, this is project organization, but usually I just do custom modifiers because I don't usually have too many of these. So I like to have one file and, if I have 5 or 6 custom modifiers, they're just all here in this file. Again, if you use custom modifiers heavily, maybe you want to organize a little bit different. Again, that's project structure, organization, highly, highly subjective. So import Swift UI, and I'm going to do a struct called standard button style. And the reason I called it this, well, real quick, this is a view modifier. And the reason I called it standard button style is typically in apps, you have many different types of button styles, I don't know, throughout the app. So the standard button style would be like, that's my typical button. And if I had different buttons, maybe I had like a checkout flow and I had like a checkout button style and that was different, right? You can see how you would label your button styles differently, but we're going to call this standard button style. So you can see I'm not conforming to the view modifier protocol because that needs a func body. You can see body, content, some view. So content is whatever you're putting this modifier on. So in our case, it will be the button, but we just want to basically modify the content, right? Which is some view. So let me show you what that actually means. So when I go to appetizer detail view, whatever I put this modifier on, like you're going to see, we're going to put a modifier here. The content would be the button because that's what the modifier is on. So while I'm here, I'm actually going to copy this. I'm not going to cut it because I'm just going to comment it out again, just so you can see the code in the source code. And then I'm going to go to the custom modifiers here. And those are the modifiers that I want to put on this content, right? Button style, tint, control size. Now, button style can only go on a button. So what's going to happen if I try to put this on a different view? Well, these modifiers just aren't going to apply and it's going to be like nothing happened. So that's fine. So now what I can do if I go back to my appetizer list view here, right? So the modifier I can put on, I can do dot modifier, and you can see this is where you put in your custom modifiers, and I can do standard button style. I'll initialize that, do a command B and resume my preview, and you should see that the button doesn't change. It looks the same. So now what I can do is go to my order view, like where this button is, right? Instead of app does not like previews, Xcode 13. Just so you know, we all deal with these like bugs and issues. So anyway, here's the button. Here's the AP button. That's the old custom button that we made. Well, I don't want the custom button. Again, I just want this to be a text. And then the string I'm going to pass into the text is this one here, same thing, and comment out the AP button. And then here's where the power comes in, right? I can just do modifier, standard button style. And then now when I run the app, my order view should have that button. And again, all I had to do is add my custom modifier. So let's add something to the order. Cool. Check the order. Now it looks like that as well. So now you can see if you had a bunch of these buttons in your apps, you just add that one little modifier to the button and you get your standard button style. So it's nice. Now, another way to refactor this, I'm not a fan of this style, but again, style is subjective. But what you may see as well is I'll just do it in the custom modifiers real quick, since this is just an example. Normally you'd want to put this extension in a new file. So you do an extension on view, or you do a func, and you would say, standard button style, and then it would be self.modifier, basically what we just typed, standard button style. So that's basically, you can put this on any view. And the reason you would do something like this is so if we go to our appetizer detail view, the button, what was that warning? Oh, I forgot to return some view. Yeah, you need that for a modifier. So now when I go to the appetizer detail view, and again, this is purely code style, you would just do dot standard button style. Here's why I'm not really a fan, is because this is just a function on a view. Like I could have put anything on that function. Yeah, I named it standard button style. I don't know. I like the fact that I have to type dot modifier. So I know, and the reader of my code knows, hey, this is a modifier, right? That's all this is a modifier. Whereas this, you can have other stuff in that function. Who knows what it does? Even though if you named it properly, like standard button style, you know you're just styling the button. I'm really splitting hairs here, but I think it's a good discussion on, just code style and why people like certain things, right? This is cleaner, and if you name it right, it'd probably be good. But I kind of like the fact that this is a modifier. Just my preference there, but I'll comment that out so you can see both ways in the source code. But that is our buttons now working with the new iOS 15 button system. We also talked about showing and hiding and colorizing the list separators, and we added our badge, which I think is really cool, that worked pretty flawlessly with very minimal code.